last night in the D. Let me tell you how I made a leave with me. Conversation and Hennessy.
Hey, what's going on? This is Greg Hoyt right over here with the Breakdown with Greg Hoyt. And this is a special live cast episode. And of course, I can't do a live without my good friend and also fellow writer for the Breakdown News. So let me go ahead and bring on the amazing Casey Benefield.
Amazing. What an awesome introduction. How you doing today, brother?
Not too bad, not too bad. I mean, yeah, and we've chatted on the sidelines about this sort of stuff before, where this election season, this election year, is going to bring about just a lot of potential firsts.
Yeah.
We have the leading Republican candidate, which it's not even just like the leading Republican candidate, based upon some polling data.
The only.
Yeah, yeah, the leading candidate.
Yeah.
And I get it. I have my innumerable criticisms of Joe Biden, the Biden administration, and I think any reasonable Democrat would too, or reasonable Republican. I'm not talking about like the fringes or anything like that, but just like reasonable people in general. They get frustrated with the party in power.
Well, I believe that from everything that I'm hearing, and I'm talking to a lot of people because Juneteenth, a couple of businessmen that I'm with here in Aurora, Colorado, along with a couple of D9 fraternities and sororities, I've actually organized, we put together a voter registration because of how important this election is. And we're already out speaking to people. And what I'm hearing a lot of is that it's not so much Joe Biden, it's the agenda of the Joe Biden administration. It's the placating to the LGBTQ community that's really rubbed people the wrong way. Easter Sunday, he declared transgender day. Like he's not just losing the support from Black votes, but he's also losing support of Christians, because Christians are saying, I can deal with a racist more than I can deal with. This came right from, I'm speaking to members of the church. They're saying that they've dealt with racism before. They said, so dealing with 45 is not as bad in their eyes because they're not compromising their morals. And that's where the fabric of the country is twofold. You have staunch conservatives that are really mad about January 6th. They're really mad about that because I saw an interview with Michael Douglas yesterday, and they're saying, well, what if we can't get him out of office? And that's a real fear. And a lot of people are still mad. For all intents and purposes, he tried to kill the vice president of the United States. He did that. Yeah, we can't. He put a hit out on Mike Pence. That happened. That happened. I mean, that you can say he didn't mean it in those words or it was taken out of context, but Mike Pence's life was in trouble because Donald Trump did not want to leave the White House.
And let's see, we have Valiant Thor commenting on here saying the last time Democrats hated a political opponent this much, it was it was Abraham Lincoln. And obviously, I'm guessing Valiant Thor is referring to former President Trump. And still, like, regardless of the sentiments towards Trump, it seems as though the catastrophic failures of the current administration, as you so pointed out, have been kind of turning the tide.
Yeah.
This was Biden's election to win, for lack of a better point.
Right. If anybody should have been able to beat if any incumbent should have been in a stronger position of power, the last time I think of an incumbent that had this type of, should have had an easy road to a second term, it would be when Barack Obama ran against Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was a weak Republican candidate. He was weak on all fronts. Immigration, he was weak with the Latino community. That was an easy victory. Barack Obama had a harder time beating John McCain because Democrats weren't afraid of John McCain. So Biden has basically put himself in a position. Well, the Democratic Party's put itself in a position where it's going to be a dogfight now. And I believe that it's going to come down to how many Republicans are going to go to the polls still mad about January 6th and vote for Biden, but not say anything. And on the other side of that spectrum, how many Democrats, because they're sick of Joe Biden's agenda and everything Joe Biden's doing, how many Democrats are going to come out of the poll and not say anything and vote for Trump?
Yeah, and so speaking about Biden and the sentiments from his base, I think it's a great opportunity to segue into some of the news of the day. Israel invades Rafah, and it's against President Biden's wishes. So the background on this was, Biden had been in conversations with folks over in Israel, basically, talking to Netanyahu's ear and saying, "Listen, if you guys go after and go into Rafah and just do what you've been doing elsewhere in Palestine, aka decimating stuff."
Right.
He was saying it was like a red line because this can really sully the ceasefire opportunity. Which, keep in mind, Hamas did agree to a ceasefire, and Israel said no.
Right.
So that brings us to and this like literal hours after Biden said earlier this week that, hey, Israel, please just stay out of that portion of Palestine.
Well,
Sure as hell. What was it? Tuesday
Tuesday.
afternoon? Yeah. Israeli.
So my question to you is, you when someone draws a red line and saying they're coming from a position of power, we're not in a position of power, and he doesn't have to talk to Netanyahu from the phone. He can talk to his own administration. There are more Israel and Jewish community in our administration than probably in their administration. We've given them all the money and all the weapons. Why? What would be the recourse for them listening? The money, the next president that comes in is still tied into that bill where they're going to get billions of dollars. You can't take that away.
About 3.9 billion.
3.9 billion. Okay. So you can't threaten them with the money because they're going to get it. The weapons that they're invading with, we sent. So what exactly is the threat? Don't you do it or we're going to be mad.
Well, the funny thing is, in light of the developments over in Rafah, the Biden administration, U.S. Officials, whatever you want to call it, they ceased the sending of some weapons over to Israel. They were like, hey, all right, we're gonna dial back the weapons thing, but it still doesn't detract from the fact that of all the issues, especially when it comes to foreign policy, this administration has been criticized heavily for just basically bad fumbling of foreign policy. This is another, negative mark on the Biden administration, showing that America seemingly just doesn't have pull. We and I know this is going to be controversial to say, Israel wouldn't exist without America. America funded and basically created Israel, and now Israel's like, don't need you anymore.
Right, exactly. So here's my point, and I want to say this so it's not offensive. The truth of the matter is, Biden is our foreign policy for the last 8 years has been bad from both administrations. Trump's administration was not good with foreign policy, and Biden's gotten worse. So we created a lot of tension in a lot of regions and then left. That's what we did, and it's almost like what do they say, the chickens have come home to roost. Israel got as much as they could from us, and now they don't need us. That sounds like how we did with Iran. That sounds like how we did with Iraq. That's the playbook. So
yeah, if you remember back during the primaries leading up to the 2008 election, Ron Paul was one of the few people, one of the few candidates on the stage that was saying a lot of our troubles in that particular region stem from our intel and funding intel operations, silent coup operations, you
yes,
know, how our intelligence agencies worked feverishly to radicalize Muslims in the region, and then we were surprised, you know, that we suffered the terrible attack back on September 11th of 2001. I don't want to get into too many things about, because unfortunately, if you get into too many facts about September 11th, YouTube.
well, I mean, okay, but here's something that you can say that can't be argued. The book I sent you, I hope you read it. Stephen Cole, Ghost Wars, and I think it's like chapter 8. The CIA knew the names and addresses of the men that were planning 9/11,
Oh yeah.
and their names were in the San Diego phone book, and they never told the FBI. So
Well, yeah.
what?
No.
So what
There's
Rand Paul was talking about is the truth.
Yeah. We are our own worst enemy when it comes to our endeavors in the Middle East.
Right.
Because the narrative always was after September 11th happened, the narrative that was being spun that led to the Patriot Act and all these terrible terrible things that have eventually been used to and weaponized against American citizens. Like
Yes.
the Patriot Act is one of the worst things.
Yeah. All you got to do is say it's a threat to national security, and all your rights are out the window. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
which is uh, interestingly enough, the one of the figures that we're going to be discussing today is one of the people that was, while he may be controversial in some of his rhetoric, people there are a lot of people who don't like what he says. The man's never committed any crimes, but the Patriot Act was basically a thing that was used to put him on no-fly lists. They
yes.
took away his money. They debanked him. He wasn't able to open up a bank account, and the government seized $500,000, every dollar to his name, a couple of years ago, without saying what he's under investigation for. He knows what it's for, because he was at the Ellipse during January 6th, but he was one of the people that didn't breach anything or anything, like, you know what I mean? He didn't do
Right.
anything illegal. Uh, but yeah, $500,000
But
gone
see,
like that.
in this country, when it comes to the Patriot Act, there's a thin line between legality and ethics. So if you do something that either party deems to be unethical, then they call it a crime, and they hide behind the Patriot Act. Like that's what they do. Now, as far as the United States halting weapons being shipped to Israel, this is usually where the United States plays a different game. When the United States asks you to step down or to not do that, there's usually an assassination. Like I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. They don't. The United States. This is why, like, when I was telling, like, I got a bunch of friends that said, "Oh man, if Trump doesn't win, they're going to take over the country." Who's going to take over the country? This government won't be toppled. This government topples governments. So if Benny over there in Israel doesn't get the message, it can be a situation where, and I mean, the list goes on. You can start with Muammar Gaddafi. They not only they were mad about the river he was building. They were mad that he was giving people $50,000 in loans, no interest, just come here, start a family, farm, and they killed the man allegedly, and then they bombed the river allegedly. And Saddam Hussein came out and said, "I'm not going to use U.S. dollars anymore. I'm only going to accept euros." And George W. Bush or George H. Bush says, "You know what? I think he has weapons of mass destruction. Let's invade." Like, I mean, so
Well,
I
also
mean,
also also keep in mind though, um, Netanyahu was instrumental in promulgating a lot of the WMD narratives floating around post
Yeah,
9/11.
yeah. Imagine that.
Because
Imagine
uh,
that.
I have to be
Benny
careful
better be
with my
careful.
yeah, I have to be careful with my words.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
then you don't have to worry about it, but Benny better damn sure be careful
well,
because I'm telling you, what on the surface it will look like, oh, look at Joe Biden, hat in hand. Please stop. And then there's an accident or things happen in this. This is a dangerous world. I'm just saying, this is a dangerous world. And I mean, people that don't think that the United States does things or believe everything is a conspiracy theory. Like, I can't believe you. I'm just telling you, the United States, they topple a lot of government. They have a lot of hands and a lot of things that happen across the globe. I will say that. And I'll leave it at that. I won't say too much because I know that, but I will say that this country has a lot of irons in the fire. And when they're told no, they don't usually respond with a okay, I guess. That's just not that's just not how that works, man. It's
Now,
not.
interesting thing, because you talked about how our government topples governments. Like we are the kingmakers,
Yes.
basically in the first world, and also in the second and the third world.
Yeah. Fourth, fifth. Like I'm
uh,
just
but I would be skeptical of there being a healthy amount of pushback, even if Netanyahu and the Israeli government doesn't play ball to the exact demands of U.S. foreign policy or the Biden administration or anything like that. I'm a little skeptical that we'd go scorched earth over there, because there is a theory floating around that a lot of our government uh, is friendly with Israel, either by either
friendly. Friendly. Oh,
either
oh.
either by perhaps having ethnic roots to the region,
You mean
or
dual citizenship? Because if anyone who's believing like uh conspiracy theories don't exist and that's dark web stuff, 92% of every decision made concerning COVID vaccinations, uh, work from home, when work was available, the opening and closing, 92% of those decisions were made by US officials with dual citizenship. And guess where the second country was? Take a guess.
I'm gonna I'm gonna go ahead and say Palestine.
I'm gonna say Israel for 200, Alex. I don't I don't think that it would be scorched earth on the surface. I believe what it would look more like, it would be like more of a Muammar Gaddafi. Now the United States can say, "Oh, we had nothing to do with that." His own people, they didn't want a dictator, and they decided to kill him. But those that has the IQ of an orange knows that there's definitely more to that story. And I believe that Benny has to know that. And here's why I believe that it's a bigger situation. So let's say that he continuously ignores Joe Biden. 45 is already running on the notion that he won't be an Israel puppet. And him and Benny don't like each other at all. So I mean, if we're being honest here, and the polls suggest right now that it's a dead heat. Like you look at some polls, they got Biden at 2% with a margin of error at 3%. And look at another poll, they got Trump at 2% with a margin of 3%. So basically what you're saying is no matter who wins the next election, neither is okay with what Israel is doing. So if Biden is supposed to be the quote unquote diplomat, and they're not listening to him. What happens if 45 wins?
That is, and that's one of those things that makes this election year so interesting, because there's a lot of things up in the air, and you and I, we've discussed this before. Support for that region, support for Israel, especially among youths, and it's not just Democrat youths. It's
No.
Republican, conservative youths, independents, and Democrat, liberal youths. The support is waning because
between 18 and 35, I believe that the support is something like 22%.
Yeah, because people are asking the question,
why?
Okay, why? Like, what makes them the greatest ally? Like, typically with an allyship, there's some kind of quid pro quo.
Right.
You help me, I help you, so on and so forth. The best they could say is maybe they give us a little bit of intel on the region. Unfortunately, when we get a little bit of intel, they have a little bit of a problem in history with selling our intel and secrets.
That's what I was about to say. Like, that's not quid pro quo. That's still us losing. Like, there's not a situation where, like, every time we've needed Israel and they say, oh, that's our sister country, that where's the help? Like, when are they going to start sending some of that money back, or say, you know what, we don't need the 3.9 billion, you guys are giving us enough?
Yeah. You really think they're going to say?
They're never going to say that.
I'm not going.
They're never going to say that.
I'm not going to make a money joke.
I'm not going to make a money joke because I'm just saying. Let's just say they're not going to get the money back. No.
But speaking of that particular region's influence in U.S. politics and legislation, I think it's a good segue to discuss the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2023, also known as HR 6090. Now, this was a piece of legislation that was introduced late last year, but out of nowhere, it just got like steamrolled through the House and passed with like an overwhelming majority. We're talking about like 300 plus votes.
Yeah.
Be like, no, we got to do this. We got to pass this. We got to pass this act. And it happened to coincide. It just miraculously coincided with demonstrations, and some were riots. I'm going to be honest. Some were riots at college campuses.
Yeah, UCLA, NY. Yeah, my auntie called me and asked me, like, hey, what is going on? So this new Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, it is very, very telling that when the youth that we were talking about, these are college students that were basically asking why. And no, we don't. We don't. I wrote an article on the breakdown about the USC student, and my biggest problem with them not letting the valedictorian speak, not because she was Muslim, well, because you don't know what she was going to say, but you could not take a chance of giving her a hot mic and having her say something adverse to Israel.
Yeah.
What is going on in this country where the valedictorian can't speak? I cannot think of the guy's name, but he's the leader of the new Nazi party. What's the white guy's name? What's his name?
Wait, are you talking about the guy that we're going to discuss later on? Because I know that.
No, not Tucker. No, we're going to discuss him. There's another guy. There's so many white guys that are part of the Nazi party. There's another guy.
I mean, there's like Richard Spencer.
Richard Spencer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
USC allowed Richard Spencer to speak there.
Yeah. That's so funny because I remember seeing some comment on the Facebook post for that where somebody's like, "Would you let a Nazi speak?" And somebody commented, "Well, Richard Spencer."
Yeah. That was on the article. Yeah, so I saw that comment. They said, "Would you let a neo-Nazi speak at your school?" And the comment was like, "Yeah, they let Richard Spencer speak." Like, I mean, I'm completely confused, and that just goes to show like where the tone of the country is, because somebody read that article and said, why would you let a Muslim who you don't know what she's gonna say, the valedictorian, speak? Would you let you're equating her to a neo-Nazi? Really?
Yeah. And that's so absurd. Like, even if somebody were just going to entertain the possibility of talking about, foreign relations between two
Right.
different countries during a valedictorian speech, I
Right.
don't think that in any way, shape, or form, even if it makes people uncomfortable, that's not the same thing. That is not the same thing as,
Did you
like
think
World War II.
Did you think Spencer was going to come to the USC campus and explain how he was wronged all these years and reiterate the Martin Luther King Jr. speech? You knew what Richard Spencer was showing up to say. You know for a fact
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
throwing up to the spit propaganda and hatred. You don't even know what this Muslim was going to say, but you said you couldn't take that chance. And
yeah,
then this guy reads the article and compares her to a neo-Nazi.
yeah, yeah.
That's where we're at in this country.
Yeah. Well, it's part of it's hyperbole, that gets injected into, the back and forth of all this shenanigans. But yeah, there are some people who literally think that, this can be reasonably equated to this, and it's just crazy. But what I found really interesting was the expedited police response to these disruptions on campuses.
Like they were
Now,
there.
yeah, because I mean, I have a pretty good memory, and it dates back beyond 4 years. But like, remember the Summer of Love over in the greater Seattle area?
Yes.
Um, you had several square blocks taken over for 90 days. You had, I think, upwards of 2 or 3 blatant homicides,
Yes.
innumerable reports of sexual assault,
Yes.
uh, and the cops didn't touch it for like 90 days.
90 days. And then when
But
they did, they came with a negotiator. Nobody got
yeah,
arrested. They came in and
yeah,
started talking. Yeah.
you know, but you have a couple of rough days on campus with some kids setting up tents. You got some skirmishes. Nothing even remotely close to the worst that, or even the middle of what
Right.
transpired, like during the BLM protests and riots. They occurred concurrently, because yes, there were protests during 2020. There were also a shitload of riots.
Right.
uh, Yet somehow a couple of bad days at college to rescue the kids from this anti-Semitism. Police were there in a heartbeat. That
Yeah.
is something. I mean, call me crazy. That just seems
Well,
oh,
I
oh,
told my auntie, I told my auntie Emily, hi auntie Emily. Uh,
I think we attracted I think we attracted a unique audience. So and I knew it was going to come discussing Nick Fuentes. You have a good. I don't know if you know the term groiper. It's kind of like a play on the word goy and groper. Goy is obviously a derogatory term in Yiddish to describe the Gentiles.
oh,
Uh, but also, we have some funny folks. You have a good sense of humor. So I'm guessing this will well will kind of, I don't know if you can see the comment.
yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And oh
What is that?
Nick
Yeah, I
Fuentes.
see it.
That's going to be the person we're going to discuss later on in a little bit. We have folks asking if they can call in. Oh man.
I
But
will
yeah.
say this: to have the police show up that fast, and then have the police in Pittsburgh not responding to anything at all. You can't call the police unless it's a homicide. Is the state of where this country is.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
It is.
And we got to keep it 100, especially when looking at the text of HR 6090. You can't convince me that let's be real, Jews in this country are being given like a really really extra special attention. They're getting extra special treatment, as
Of
evidenced on
course.
college campuses. The fact that they farmed out the definition of anti-Semitism to the IHRA. So the IHRA, not only did they farm out the definition to the IHRA, which is what is it? The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. All right, they farmed out the definition of what anti-Semitism is in our legislation. IHRA is not an American entity. It's an entity that involves a myriad of foreign countries, which we just happen to kind of be in cahoots with in
Right.
this IHRA thing. But on top of them adopting the definition of anti-Semitism, the legislation also adopted what were described as examples of anti-Semitism. And some of the examples, listed off in this, it's insane. That's the best way I can describe it. I'll read off some of the examples to give you an idea as to what could be the impetus of a potential civil rights violation. They're going to use these as potential impetuses to investigating civil rights violations. For instance, if you deny scopes, facts, or denying the fact scope mechanisms, e.g., gas chambers, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices in World War II. Basically, if you're on a college campus and you're saying, I think something didn't happen, a certain something didn't happen,
Right.
or I question the numbers,
Right.
if you're out there saying the math doesn't quite add up, that could lead to an investigation being opened on you for civil rights violations of your Jewish peers. Pretty insane, or even this is even better. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of Nazis. So you can't compare the country of Israel to Nazism, even if it's just an act of hyperbole or anything like that.
Right.
I'm just like you got to be freaking kidding me.
Well, I mean, it's just like whoever W was, that jackass could use the N word, but that's not a violation of civil rights. But if you say you don't believe that X amount of people were killed during X amount of time, that could draw an investigation.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
This is the even crazier thing. Again, this is all based upon the IHRA definition, which we farmed out for our legislation to initiate civil rights infringement investigations on college kids and college administrators and whatever, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group.
Right.
So you
can't say
even talk about
a Jew did it.
You can't talk about the USS Liberty.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, yeah, because that is absolutely 100% a real wrongdoing. All right. Never forget they shot down the lifeboats too. All right. They shot down the lifeboats.
They did that.
And I find it absolutely insane that that our country, the United States, our legislators, who's supposed to represent American interests, have done something that basically, in my opinion, I think this violates the First Amendment. Like, full stop. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not just a violation of the First Amendment. When the funny part is you keep saying our country. Is it our country anymore? I'm not I mean, I'm not being facetious. I'm asking the truth. Like it took what, almost 3 years for Biden to sign anything remotely close to protecting Black people in this country. And then you have Biden sending money to Africa for reparations. But the debate we had about reparations, can't give people, Americans, anything. However, we send all our money to Israel, and there are laws in place here to protect those that are practicing Judaism. They're not even real Jews, if we're being honest.
Yeah,
So,
because there is a distinction between ethnic and practicing.
Absolutely, there's a distinction. So you're putting laws in place to protect somebody who's practicing a religion versus a race of people. Those are two different things.
Which, yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, like Title VI of Civil Rights Act was never necessarily meant to protect religious
Religious,
discrimination.
no, because
Yeah,
church and state will still be separate.
yeah,
Yeah, church and state will still be. That's what I'm saying. Is this really our country? Because church and state is not separate when it comes to Israel. That's, I mean,
I mean, yeah, the writing is absolutely on the wall.
yeah,
And the funny thing is, I think this legislation um, has really opened up the eyes of a lot of people who normally would abstain from criticism of Israel, criticism of Jewish Americans or whatever, or at least the special protections afforded to them. Uh, and so yeah, no, I think this legislation, it was like a blessing and a curse. It's bad, in the long run, because it's like, okay, this is obviously not good, and hopefully the Senate doesn't, greenlight it. But maybe they will, because we're talking about 300 people in the House.
right. That let it get through. So
Yeah,
my thing is that I believe that it's gonna have dire consequences, but it's also gonna have positive consequences. The more things like this that happens in this country, the more energized the youth are becoming. And when I say the youth, is across the whole spectrum. It's conservatives, Democrats, and independents. They're not okay with this. And they're definitely not okay with losing the right to say, hey, I disagree with that. Because basically what you're saying. You're not saying that I I don't have you're taking away a person's opinion. If I say I don't believe me that X, Y, and Z happened, you're saying that if I say that, I can be investigated and it can be considered a hate crime. That's my opinion.
yeah.
It's not coming from a place of hate. My opinion is based on the things that I've read, the things that I've seen, and the research that I've done. And based on that is why I feel about this. And then you're telling me that I've committed a crime by thinking that way.
Yeah, and so I think this is a good segue, because while all this was transpiring, you got this ridiculous legislation, that made its way through the House. You have the controversies associated with the Israeli government now blatantly, just flagrantly saying we don't listen to the United States. Like, they're saying the United States isn't daddy. That's basically what they're saying.
Right.
Uh, while all this is going on, you have an individual uh, who for the past 5, 6, 7 years has ostensibly been the most maligned person in mainstream media, and he was deplatformed to a point. He couldn't get on YouTube, he couldn't get on Facebook, he couldn't get on Twitter. Uh, this man was debanked, had $500,000 taken away from him by the government, no explanation given, other than he's probably getting investigated. He was put on a no-fly list, can't fly anywhere. If he wants to go anywhere in the U.S., he's got to take a train, bus, drive. All right, all this for someone who has never been charged with a criminal offense. Uh,
Right.
the worst that he's guilty of is being a dissident of mainstream politics, or what is perceived as okay politics as defined by the current Overton window. But as we discussed earlier, it's shifting. This guy was ahead of the curve. he said the words and asked the questions that were not appropriate to ask, because once you asked them, you got hit with the anti-Semitism label. And so while he was deplatformed for years, not afforded really an opportunity to counter a lot of the narratives and stuff like that going on about him, you had all these apparatuses, and they were in conservative media, Democrat media, independent media, taking snippets, jokes, things that he said, and turning it into massive headlines. Everybody from Daily Wire to Media Matters, they were all complicit in painting this guy as being like arguably like the most horrible person that came on the face of the earth. Uh, Obviously, we're talking about Nick Fuentes, and I'd like to introduce him in his own words. I don't know how much of his content you've seen, and I had to select clips carefully, so that way, because I don't know how YouTube feels about Fuentes. They kind of have a weird relationship with him. He's banned on the platform. Sometimes people have had him on as guests, but then sometimes those episodes get removed. This, for the sake of YouTube, This is for the purposes of understanding, context, and commentary.
Thinks that I got canceled because I said one thing or another thing. But if you look at the whole history of my career, it follows that basic pattern. And I could explain a lot of stories like that. I don't want to tell every single one, but that was really the beginning of how I started to become canceled as a very young person. Keep in mind, this happened when I was 18 years old. I had no backing. I was just a freshman in college. And suddenly, because I disagreed with a few journalists in private, not even in public, but really in private, they had Ben Shapiro with millions of followers, with millions of dollars from the Wilkes brothers and from his company, publicly bashing me, going and blackballing me, blacklisting me in the movement. They got me banned from CPAC. Cassie Dillon had connections at the American Conservative Union and pulled strings for them to put me on a blacklist so I couldn't go to CPAC. They went to Turning Point USA and said that I couldn't be hosted as a speaker at Turning Point. I mean, these kinds of things, it went on and on and on like this. And their collaboration with Media Matters, with Right Wing Watch, with groups like this, is what eventually built up this dossier of things where I had made a joke on my show or something was taken out of context, or maybe I just said something controversial, and they built up this list that was eventually used against me.
So one of the interesting things right there is he brought up Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. The Daily Wire offered Nick Fuentes a job
Right.
several years ago. This is like back in, I want to say like 2016.
2016.
Yeah, and it was because Fuentes, he didn't know at the time, but he was, a part of a college debate where he was debating a pro-Trump stance. His opponent was obviously going with pro-Hillary, stuff like that. And then at the time, though, Ben Shapiro wasn't a fan of Donald Trump. I don't know if you're aware of that. In the lead up to the 2016 election, Ben Shapiro was actually very anti-Trump. It wasn't until after he assumed office for a few months that he began saying, like, hey, you want something? I actually like this president. But before Nick Fuentes even had an opportunity to put pen to paper at the Daily Wire, he made one simple observation. Just, I believe it was something to the effect of, he made a statement like, if you're Mexico first, go to Mexico. If you're Israel first, go to Israel. Now, the funny thing is, Ben Shapiro had no issue with him saying, if you're Mexico first, go to Mexico. He harped directly on him saying, if you're Israel first, go to Israel. And Ben Shapiro on Twitter quote tweeted Nick Fuentes, who at the time was a very minor celebrity. He wasn't even a celebrity. He was just barely on the radar at the time. So you have this person with several million followers posting your little tweet up there and accusing you of being an anti-Semite. That was what got the ball rolling on his, cancellation. So I'll let him continue on how that played out.
To get me banned from YouTube and PayPal and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and every other thing that you can imagine. And then, and this is the insidious thing about censorship, it gets to the point where, and I said this on the space yesterday, the worst part about censorship, it's not just that I don't get to express my opinion on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Obviously, if I get censored, then I can't go on Twitter and tell everybody what I think about Israel and the war in Gaza, or what I think about Russia and the war in Ukraine, or COVID, or whatever. But that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, if I don't have a platform, everybody gets to talk about me, and they get to speak for me. They get to define what I'm about. They get to define even my own words. Everything that people hear, read, or see about me is through the lens of somebody else. So people clip 5 seconds of my show and post it on Twitter, and that's what people see. People will write a report about something I said. That's what people see. And so over time, I became censored from everything. It has been 3 years since I got banned from every platform. 3 years since I've had an account on any major platform until I was reinstated on X just days ago. And in that time, over a period of 3 years, people have just piled on the lies. He said this, he said that, he's an avowed this or that. He's, you know, he said this on his show. And over time, they've made me out to be a complete caricature. And by doing things subtly and every day, it's death by 1,000 cuts. If they take one thing out of context slightly every single day for 3 years, eventually they build up a mountain of evidence. But I mean, if you go through and examine every single one, you see, oh, this thing was a joke, or that thing meant this in a particular context. But by the end of it, they create a completely different caricature, a shadow version of me that everybody believes is a real me.
Yeah, I know, and like based upon his explanation, like, you know, when he was diving into just how that played out, how you get to have all these different media apparatuses and pundits kind of create their narrative of you, and you don't have an opportunity to really, or a sizable platform to say, hey, you want to know something that's not the case. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you've seen headlines about him before. I'm sure you've read reports and things about him.
Yeah.
What are your
So
thoughts and takeaway from that particular segment?
so the one thing that he is absolutely correct about is if you don't give a person a chance to defend themselves, then whatever is said becomes the truth. There's no doubt about that. And if you Google Nick Fuentes, by the time you get to something that he actually said, it's because I looked before you and I came on. There are thousands of things that somebody said that Nick Fuentes said. He said this, or when he said that. They're not even direct quotes. And he never had an opportunity to set the record straight, if you will.
Yeah.
This is why I tell people we have a state-run media. There's no difference in our media and China's. You're allowed to say what they allow you to say.
Yeah.
And if you say something that they disagree with, they have means to not let you say anything else. And the flip side of that is not just letting you say anything else, but then they get to say whatever they want to say about you. And it keeps building. If he had all, let's say for the sake of argument, let's say that Nick Fuentes was a billionaire. It wouldn't have mattered. He could not get on any platform to defend anything that was being said about him. All the money in the world wouldn't have helped.
Well, yeah, and also we found out, you know, even when you have all the money in the world,
they can take it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
yeah, because he delved in, you know, he spoke about getting basically robbed of $500,000. And the government, they can hold on to that money as long as they want. You can't petition it back from the FBI or the CIA.
No. I don't know if you're familiar with Supreme. When Supreme was on trial against the 5th District of New York, there's a doc series when they talk about Murder Inc. And the feds told Irv Gotti and the rest said, listen, you guys take this misdemeanor plea bargain and we'll release all the money, because they went in and froze all their money. Millionaires froze all their money. And Irv Gotti said, no, if I take this plea bargain, you're going to use that against Supreme. They said, okay, fine. We're not releasing the money. So this man had to go to trial against the United States government with a public defender of their choice. because they had no money to hire a lawyer. Like that's that is the greatest. And for all who don't know, Supreme is here in Florence, Colorado, in ADX with Chapo. They froze all Chapo's money. You'll never get it back. You'll never get it back. And you'll never see a dime of it. So when they tell you we're taking all your money and we're not going to let you talk, how can you defend that? Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Nick Fuentes fan or just as an American. How would you go about defending yourself against basically the indefensible? You're actually telling me to fight rumors, but don't say anything.
The funny thing is, and when I was getting ready for the conversation today, because there is literally a new headline about him every day.
Every day.
And I think this one, it came from Mediaite, and Mediaite is like, if you are looking for just complete brain rot, they're like the tabloid of political commentators. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's what they are. They're a tabloid masquerading as a legitimate outlet because all they do is tabloid headlines.
Right.
And they did one with Fuentes today, saying that, quoting him as he said, "I'm going to be the type of person who will one day off my wife." He didn't use the word off, but the
Right.
paywall. Now, that makes for a great headline. What wasn't expanded upon was he was just hilariously joking during the actual segment saying that. And then after, he's like, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding." Like, he created this, kind of really just ridiculous narrative. He's like, "I'm going to be the kind of husband, I'm going to have a bad day at work. My wife's going to say something, get on my nerves. And then I'm just going to do it."
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So let's say he said that this, me having a bad day at work, would be the beginning of one of the greatest episodes of Snapped. That's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. But if someone takes what I just said now and put it in a snippet and says, Casey said that the next bad day he's going to be on Snapped, Monet's in trouble. If that's the headline and you don't let me clarify it or say we were talking about what Nick Fuentes says and this was the context, and I can't say that, you know how people are going to run with that?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, because the juicy headline, a lie spreads faster than
Always.
Yeah.
Always. There's
Lies
saying
better.
that you it's easier to get people to believe a lie than it is the truth.
Yeah, lies are better. They're more
Absolutely.
Remember,
Lies feel good.
Yeah, you remember Juicy Smouye, Jussie Smollett. That
Yeah,
lie, man.
yeah.
That
I think that's one of Dave Chappelle's greatest jokes, because when he says there are two black men in Chicago with MAGA hats on, that is, he says, and they had on MAGA hats. Write that down. That's one of the greatest jokes, but that's the truth though. And the blowback, look, like it was over for him. It didn't just kill him, but it killed Empire. It killed everything.
Oh yeah,
Everything he said, like all based on just a small lie to get some headline.
Yeah, well, he got more than some headline. He captured national attention.
Yeah.
And I bet he looks back on that. He's like,
oh, if he had a chance to do it all over again, he would never. He'd said they had on Hillary hats. If he had a chance, and it's one of those things where I'm glad you brought that up. So what that did was it gave fuel to the conservatives to say, see, look how crazy the Democrats are. They'll even lie on this man and make up stories about his supporters, blah, blah, blah. I believe that what happened with Nick Fuentes was it's the same thing happening with a lot of former Fox. You can't go on Fox and tell the truth in a lot of instances.
oh yeah,
You can't, because two things happen. everybody that wasn't on Fox is going to say, remember that guy was on Fox, can't believe him. And then Fox is going to say we had to let him go because he was such a liar. He was truly. So it's state-run media. I don't care what anybody says. You cannot, from the Candace Owens to Don Lemon.
Oh yeah.
Don Lemon. You cannot tell the truth as a media, as a journalist anymore. If you do, it better align with what the network wants.
Oh yeah.
Because if it doesn't, then you're done. Like CNN is paying Don Lemon a whole bunch of money, like $50-something million. And all he did was his job. He told the truth. He didn't state an opinion. He told the truth, and that was that. And people think that that free speech is a real thing. Keep believing that.
Oh yeah. And speaking, to kind of end this on an interesting note, because there's not really much to say about updates regarding Trump's legal issues. So at least an update with regard to the hush money trial. And I'm not a huge fan of calling it the hush money trial. It's easier for people to understand it, because really it has nothing to do with whether or not some type of a bribe was given or anything like that. Because that's not the illegality being alleged.
Right.
The illegality being alleged, at least in this particular instance, is claiming that Trump misfiled this payment to Stormy Daniels. He called it a legal expense.
Yeah.
Whereas
it was a payoff.
Yeah.
That's what
they're trying to say. It's a campaign finance violation. They're saying,
right, because you took the money from your campaign and you had Michael Cole come pay it. The only thing I can tell you about the hush money trial, I think, is funny. I mean, because Stormy Daniels was leaving the courtroom and a guy was heckling her and says, "You're a whore. You'll sell your story. You'll sell anything." And she looked back and said, "That's not true, because I won't sell Bibles."
Yeah, but I will say, like, the with her being as kind of like one of the star witnesses in the case, and it's a laughable a laughable thing, because I've always said this particular case, this Alvin Bragg endeavor, is a laughable case. The problem is, I don't think you would never be able to find a fair jury for a character like Trump in New York. Whether or not the facts were completely on Trump's side and he was innocent as can be, you wouldn't be able to find like an unbiased jury. You know what I mean? Because it is what it is with a figure as popular / divisive. You find a couple people on the street in a blended area, you'll probably find one person that likes him, one person who hates him, and they will the likelihood of those people, those who are for him or those who are against him, the idea of them being able to separate their biases from examining a case of alleged criminal conduct, I don't think that's easily achievable.
Well, he knew that. That's why he asked for the continuance. He wanted to be pushed after the election because he knows it really doesn't matter what the evidence is. This case is over once he got charged.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
This is going to be honestly the only case that has a shred of possibility being wrapped up before the election transpires. Because, like I said, Stormy Daniels was in court testifying on May 7th. The thing is still going, but that has a possibility of wrapping up before the election. Whereas the few other cases that he has, because we got the one over in Florida, which is the mishandling of documents, that has been indefinitely postponed by Judge Aileen Cannon. And I think the understanding and the reasoning behind it is kind of makes sense, even if it has some people upset on the left. And that's because Trump is also tied up actively in 3 other cases, putting motion after motion after motion, because the 2 election interference cases, the ones in Georgia, the federal one, the DOJ one, those don't have a hope of being done before the election. And so the judge over in Florida is like, we're not even going to pretend that we can foresee when this will be wrapped up. So we're just going to indefinitely postpone it. Because also that's also one of the most inconsequential cases anyway, is the documents case. As for the case in Georgia, the Georgia Court of Appeals is still considering the removal of DA Fani Willis over, her many scandals surrounding her office in this particular case.
But I mean, my thing with that is removing her is not going to remove the evidence.
Yeah,
It's not going to change it. It's not going to remove the evidence. It is what it is. I keep telling people that there's nothing on the books that says you can't be a sitting president from jail. So I believe that, well, that's the truth. He can, I mean, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do know that he's going to have the New York conviction before the election.
Yeah.
And I believe that what they're doing is they're going to use that conviction as a prior to enhance other sentences in the other cases. I mean, I know we're a long way from that, but this is they went for low-hanging fruit. You get that, and then you can say, well, because of X, this is why Z happened, and then you move forward with the next case. Even though is not that severe, it becomes important, not severe but important, because of the prior felony conviction. And I don't think
at least the case being handled by Alvin Bragg, I believe that's a misdemeanor case,
right.
So I mean I still believe you're correct insofar as like that was going to be, and it ironically it was like the first domino to fall.
Right.
Somebody wanted to see who was gonna throw the first rock in the water type of thing.
Right.
And so yeah, Alvin Bragg did it.
This is precedent. So you can no longer say that you can't charge a former president. You can't say that.
Yeah,
so you get that on the books.
Yeah.
Right. You get that on the books, and now you can move forward with the big stuff. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, in New York, it's a misdemeanor. The Georgia case, while the claims are pretty up there, I mean, the Georgia case and the federal case, they're both kind of synonymous. They're both trying to tackle the same actions and the alleged criminal behaviors. I think both those cases, they rest on a very novel legal theory. To claim to call a presidential cabinet, an administration, to call an administration organized crime, because they're using RICO, or at least Georgia is. Georgia's using RICO.
And I'm telling you, if you look at the numbers, RICO cases are extremely hard to beat.
Well, yeah, because all you have to really prove in RICO cases, more often than not, are like elements of conspiracy, or conspiratorial elements, or actions that are not illegal by themselves,
right,
but lead up to something that is believed to be, or legitimately is illegal.
And that's the problem. And that's some problem. So if you go into that case and you have a conviction for the misdemeanor of the hush money, you can then start to show a pattern. And if you can show a criminal pattern where you say he uses money and influence to do this, and the jury hears that, it's going to be hard for them not to believe it, because you say, well, they convicted him for that.
Well, yeah, but also again, like with the New York case, that case in particular, it's not really, that doesn't necessarily establish like a pattern of intentional, intense criminality on par with RICO. We're talking about like mislabeling something.
Yeah, but see, it's not just the mislabeling. Like when they put the tabloid guy on there. I would take stories and I would catch and kill, and they kept saying that. It's they're not looking for the law, they're looking for ethical violations. So that's what I mean. Like this, it's almost like when you're in a trial and the judge says the jury will disregard the witness's testimony. They heard it. They heard it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter anymore if it's legal or true anymore. They heard it. And if a lawyer gets up there and says, "Hey, the reason this happened was because of this," now it sounds like fancy lawyer tricks versus the law. So you get people hearing things like, "Oh, so he also in ethics cheated to win the election. He hid bad things. He had his lawyer sneaking around with money and paying off the porn star." Those things aren't illegal, but it shows a pattern of criminality because they always talk about him like he's some mob boss. And we've all seen movies like that's how the mob operates. So when you're talking about a RICO case, you want to show mob-like behavior. You got your lawyer out with stacks of money doing things that you shouldn't be. You call the attorney general and basically use the Godfather favor for a favor line. Like those things. I mean, that's really what it is. That's really what it is. Like, this Michael Corleone on the other side of the phone, and if you do this, I'll be forever in your debt. Like those type of things are gonna play out. And that is exactly the first domino falling. That's why they went about it the way they did.
Well, yeah,
because that's what it's gonna look like.
Well, yeah, what I'm curious to see is if a conviction is secured in New York. I don't know off the top of my head what the misdemeanor sentencing range is over there.
It's like it's 90 days to 6 months.
Yeah, but essentially they could pretty much get him to a point where he's like in a jail cell, and yes, he could absolutely be elected president while sitting in a jail cell. That would be interesting.
That's why I'm looking for a new country to live in. This is getting ridiculous, man. This place is ridiculous. I mean, our sitting president is gonna do his first speech in an orange jumpsuit. Yeah, that's great.
He's gonna be filling out the bubble sheet.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. Nothing like watching Trump eating a beef stew with over a noodle with pork rinds in it and making a tweaker pie later that day. Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, brother, I've enjoyed you, man. I've enjoyed you. I've enjoyed this, man. I believe that this election will be a complete circus. I believe that we definitely haven't heard the last of Nick Fuentes. And I believe that the youth in this country, when I say youth, I mean like 18 to 35, are energized by the blatant care for those practicing Judaism versus the care of those born in this country. Yeah. That's my ending take. That's what I take from everything that's going on.
I'm kind of like right there with you. This election cycle it's going to be a shit show. There's no other way to describe it because there are so many uncertainties. It doesn't matter whether like you're pro Biden or pro Trump or anything like that, Republican, Democrat. No matter what side of the aisle you sit on politically, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a messy election, no matter what. And I don't think anybody when it's all said and done, when the dust settles, I don't think anybody's going to be looking around with their hands on their hips, being like, "Man, not bad."
No. I don't think there's going to be an election where it's going to be won. I believe it's going to be an election where somebody lost.
Yeah, and as far as like Nick Fuentes coming back into the mainstream, I think it's awesome. I think we need more political firecrackers. I think we need people that have the guts to go out there and say crazy things, maybe unpopular truths, maybe wild opinions. Because when you have those things kind of injected into the conversation, when you have stances, positions, whether they relate to domestic or foreign policy, if they're so divorced from what we're actually experiencing now, then you actually have an opportunity to get some real change. Because when you bounce one extreme off another, you wind up getting something that's, kind of in the middle of the two, which at this point, man, something's got to change. And
Yeah, my
so,
address. I'm looking to move. Yeah, I got you.
well, anyway, thank you again, Casey.
No,
For
thank you for having me, man. I appreciate the love. When we do this voter registration, I'll be in touch with you because I want to get the flyer out to have everybody come out. No, and we're not telling people who to vote for. We're just telling people that they exercise their vote, because this election will be one of the most important ones. And not so much about what's at the top of the ticket, because at the top of the ticket, I believe the higher it goes up, the worse it gets. So we're trying to get people to focus about the things that are affecting them in their community. That's where you're going to get real change. Because if you're in your community and you're waiting for Washington to change something in your neighborhood, you probably got an F in government, because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you again, and I hope you have a good night, brother.
You too, brother.
Two to the one, from the one to the three. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe, and I get more ass than